Welcome back in. This segment of the show brought to you by Safety Systems. March Madness is a great time to have your own theater room, folks. You're watching all these games, all these buzzer-beating finishes on a big screen projector, 4K, surround sound. It doesn't get much better than that. Now, you can't get one here in the next week, of course, but if you've got that hankering to do that for football season, you got all those college and pro games coming at surround sound. It's like you're in the stadium. It's fantastic. VFL J.J. Surlis and the team at Safety Systems do the home theater systems better than anybody else I've ever seen. They are spectacular. SafetySystems.com to learn more about them. Give JJ a call this week to see what they can do for you. All right, this segment is how much blame does Rick Barnes get? Everyone knows the knock on Barnes. He's had one Sweet 16 since 2008. And here's the thing, the downside of that is it's not like he's Don DeVoe at Navy, where he gets in as a lesser seed and plays some. He usually has a really good regular season, gets a good seed, and then as you've seen at Tennessee, he loses to a lower seed. That's facts. That's not being negative. You can't argue that. Look it up. But how much blame does he get for yesterday's loss? Because you got some people saying you can't blame him at all for their poor shooting. You got some people saying it's all on him. How much blame goes to Rick Barnes? Chuck.
Well, I tell you what, as the head coach, obviously some, but I mean, at the end of the day, when you only hit 2 of 18 three-point shots, I don't know how much you can put on the coach for that. I mean, that's abysmal. So I think your defense against the Michigan post player, I think you can question that. I think you needed to try something else. You can maybe look at some other adjustments here and there. He gets some of the blame, obviously, but I don't put a whole lot on him for that loss.
I'd give him very little blame, but the one thing you said was the one thing that concerned me the most was I didn't think Tennessee did a very good job defensively against Hunter Dickinson. He had his way. He hit 3. He hit it inside. I can't blame him for James going 0 for 6 from three-point range or Vescovy going 1 for 5 or 0 for 9 in the second half from three-point range. I have a hard time blaming him for that. Heck, they just went 14 of 24 in the previous game. But I thought the defense on Dickinson could have been altered.
From a coach's side, I mean, you're analyzing it all, and I'd be thinking about, again, I don't think you'd have a lot of blame, but if I'm self-reflecting on it, certain rotations, do you play a little bit more? Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, you're thinking even like we talked about, could you have played Brandon Huntley-Hatfield earlier in the season rather than Uros's minutes, so that way Brandon Huntley-Hatfield was more prepared for this moment to be able to give you some of that offensive punch that we didn't have on the inside. So rotation-wise, that would be one thing that I'd be looking at. And then if you're not making threes, you're analyzing, gosh, could we have sped the game up different ways? Try to press them a little bit. Try to get out in transition and get their big moving away from the basket. But, again, I don't give Barnes much blame at all. But if I'm coaching that game last night, that's some of the self-reflection that I'd be having.
Yeah, I wanted to see us speed the game up some, too, and I wanted to see us do something different with Dickinson. I don't blame Coach Barnes. I give more credit to Michigan than I give blame to us.
I think anybody that's talking about firing Rick Barnes is insane. Look, you've never been to a Final Four in school history. It's hard to then demand Final Four of a guy who's been to one in 33 years or whatever. That's just not who you this program needs to be focusing on the pool. Don't look at the ocean. If you ever make a Final Four, congratulations, that's spectacular, but that's not who you are. Focus on SEC titles, competing for tournament titles, all that stuff. That's what your focus is. If you get something else, that's gravy. So you're crazy if you're talking about firing the guy. He puts butts in seats. He beat Arizona this year. Did you like watching him beat North Carolina? Did you like beating Kentucky 2 out of 3? Did you like cutting down the nets at the SEC tournament? Because if you go back in time, Tennessee's had a lot of coaches couldn't do any of that crap. So that's where I protect Barnes. At the same time, the Brandon Huntley-Hatfield thing. Well, they didn't have an answer for Dickinson. Why wasn't Huntley-Hatfield getting ready for this moment? I wonder, and we've talked about this off air, I wonder if Rick Barnes isn't a better general manager, program runner, than he is floor coach. And one thing that dawned on me, and this is where I'm going with this, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, was Rick Barnes focusing on him long term? We have to teach him to play defense, and then he'll get on the floor. He's looking at that long development. Another coach might have said, I'm going to put him in here, and I'm going to chew his butt after every time he screws up on defense, but I got to get him ready for March. I don't know that Barnes gets his team. I think he's focused big picture, long term. I'm going to improve this player and this player. I don't think he's saying,
John?
March. I may be wrong. You guys tell me.
I tell you what I heard and what was said. Those minutes are earned in practice. And Huntley Hatfield did not earn those minutes in practice, and that's the type of coach Rick Barnes is, and the demands he puts in on his players are really a lot there in terms of film study, in terms of like the whole list. And in his eyes, Huntley Hatfield had not earned that, and then he started to get better in that respect, and then Kamwa gets hurt, and then he does get minutes. But he had to earn those minutes in practice. Rick Barnes said he didn't do it early in the season.
He can say that all he wants. I would be looking at it saying, who's my best player in March going to be? If I'm going to make a run to the Final Four, if that's the goal here, who's going to get me there? Uros Plavsic or Brandon Huntley Hatfield? And I'd have been saying, I'm going to have to light a fire into this kid's butt, but by God, he's the one that's going to get me there. And there are some coaches who would do that, and it still wouldn't work.
Well, and that's the hard part of leadership, right? You're trying to reward the guys that are doing the right things, and if all of a sudden you're putting in a guy that, to your point, Chuck's not doing what he's supposed to be doing in practice just because he's really talented, that's where you don't end up having the locker room and the culture and the cohesiveness that this team has. You can talk, I coached with a guy that did that. Bruce Pearl would just play the best guys, and there was no accountability to how they had to behave in certain. They just played the best guys. Now we won, but there was so much internal fighting and there was just issues, and so you're not having that with Barnes. Barnes is going to have principles, and you're going to do things the right way, and you're going to win a lot. Maybe not to everybody's liking all the time, but he's going to be a great, admirable person that you want representing your university, and that's what Barnes is.
There you go. All right. Let me throw out one more thing. That I will say, this sounds like I'm hopping on. Again, I'm the one that said people talking about firemen are insane. I agree with everything you just said there in terms of who he is and what he represents. The people who say you can't blame him when they go 2 for 18. Didn't we praise him when they shot the lights out and won an SEC tournament? He's the guy that puts the guys on the floor, isn't he? He's the guy that builds that roster. We praise him when they win because they're doing things well. You can't then turn around and say, but he's free of blame when they don't do what they're supposed to do. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying you fire him for them going 2 for 18. I'm just saying he did walk in after they were hitting shots a few years ago and said, I need more money or I'm going to UCLA. He didn't have a problem taking some credit for some guys hitting shots 3 years ago. Most coaches don't. That's exactly how they make their money. So it's a little silly, in my view, to then say, well, it's all wins are on the coaches, losses are on the players. I don't go there, but I'm a schmuck. So when we come back, let's talk about next year's team. Come on back.